Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and we are back at it with spoiler season for Magic the Gathering's Avatar: The Last Airbender expansion. It's the spoiler season that just never seems to end. There are sets like every 2 months now, and even more sets coming next year. And it's kind of exhausting, but that doesn't diminish how exciting the cards themselves actually are, especially on a mechanical level, even if you're not necessarily into the Avatar: The Last Airbender IP. So we're going to dive in and go over all of the new cards coming. This is day 8 of spoiler season. We are getting somewhat close to the end, and before we dive in, I'm just going to remind you guys that the early access event for this is happening on Wednesday, November 12th. To Thursday, November 13th, and I will be doing marathon streams on both of those days, making crazy, ridiculous deck ideas, and making sure to get those deck ideas out to you guys on YouTube ASAP. So if you have crazy ideas for decks, definitely let me know in the comments, and I will brew up a storm. I hope to see you there. Also, before we dive in, please like the video, please subscribe if you're new, all that good stuff. Help the channel so I can keep bringing you all of this ridiculousness that is the never-ending spoiler season. But let's dive in. First off, we've got Fire Nation Raider, a 4/2 human soldier for 1 red and 3. Has the raid ability. When this creature enters, if you attack this turn, create a clue token. Honestly, not too bad. It's going to trade up potentially with a 4/4 creature in combat if you can set up the right play lines. But also, if you just make sure you attack before you play this thing, you get card advantage to replace it. So even if you don't get the most value out of trading this, and you're forced to trade it with like a 2/2 or something like that, you still have card advantage to make up for the card that you lost in the form of the glue tokens. So honestly, not that bad. Could fill in your mana curve just a little bit, be like that 22nd, 23rd card in limited. Not bad when it comes to commons. Next up, we have Sandbender's Storm. An instant for 1 white and 3. You choose one. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater, or Earthbend 3. A spell like this that can pivot and be board presence or removal, depending on the situation you're in, is actually really, really good. And remember, that Earthbending 3 actually matters a lot more than just giving you a 3/3, because it's a creature that when it dies gives you back the normal land again. Not being a creature version of the land anymore. And also, those +1/+1 counters can matter with some of the +1/+1 counter synergies that we've already seen in the set. So, Earthbend 3 is slightly better than just giving you a random 3/3 token, in my opinion. And being able to pivot and destroy anything with power 4 or greater, and being able to choose those things at instant speed is awesome. You could potentially make a 3/3 land creature when your opponent attacks and block their 2/2, and not only do you have a 3/3, but you also killed their small guy. So being able to make the 3/3 to kill small guys, or pivot if they have a big guy and just use this to kill a big guy, those are really versatile options, and I really like everything this card is doing. Next up, we've got Fire Navy Trebuchet, a 0/4 artifact creature wall with Defender and Reach for 1 black and 2. Whenever you attack, you create a 2/1 colorless construct artifact creature token with flying named Ballistic Boulder that's tapped and attacking. Sacrifice that token at the beginning of the next end step. I love the flavor here. You're just launching boulders with the Trebuchet when you attack, which is nice. You do have to sacrifice that token, which also makes sense flavorfully. But what's cool about this is you can utilize some other synergies, such as sacrificing the 2/1 after combat, because you don't have to sacrifice it to this ability until the next end step. So you could sacrifice it to other sacrifice abilities, get synergies to pop off. So you're getting more value than just potentially a 2/1 attacker, and the fact that you're generating a 2/1 attacker every single turn means that they can't just trade with it and have it be gone forever, because you make a new one the next turn and a new one the next turn. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like an Urabrask's Forge, the same cost in a different color. The difference is you get an 0/4 Reach Defender while you're swinging in, and you don't get to grow every single turn like the Urabrask's Forge would. But you start out a little bit smaller, right? You start out immediately being able to sling a 2-power creature at your opponent the very turn that you drop this, while holding back a 4 toughness reach blocker. And that sort of kind of makes up to a certain extent for some of what's missing with the scalability of the 𝑇𝑒𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑐ℎ Forge. I like a lot about this. I like that you have a creature to just sacrifice every single turn. I think there are a lot of valuable ways you can use that in the current standard and sacrifice decks. Is this good enough for standard? I don't know. I mean, 3 mana, probably not. I think if it was 2 mana, definitely. 3 mana, I'm not sure. There's an outside chance for sure, because just creating free fodder to sacrifice every single turn and getting to swing with it first is not nothing. It's also worth noting this is an artifact, so sometimes you can line up additional synergies because of that. It's a really cool card. At the very least, it's going to be really, really awesome in Limited and probably fit into multiple deck archetypes. Next up, we've got Iroh's Demonstration. I'm pronouncing it correct now. Give me a like for that. Give me a comment telling me how proud of me you are. This is a sorcery lesson for 1 red and 1, and you choose one. It deals 1 damage to each creature your opponents control, or 4 damage to target creature. I love this. Just a 2 mana 4 damage removal spell that can pivot and potentially take out a bunch of 1 toughness creatures instead is insanely versatile. Just the 4 damage to a creature is already kind of good enough on its own for the 2 mana, especially considering the fact that it's a lesson and it's going to synergize with all of those lesson synergies you could potentially have in your deck. And then it can pivot and just do 1 damage to everything instead. Everything about that is just amazing. I think this card is really, really good. I think it's going to be a super high pick in Limited, and I actually think this might end up seeing some play in Standard as well. But next up, we've got the Boulder Ready to Rumble, a 4/4 legendary human warrior performer for 1 green and 3, and whenever the boulder attacks, you Earthbend X, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 4 or greater. So having a 4/4 creature for 4 mana is already somewhat on rate. So the fact that you just get to automatically generate extra creatures every time you swing is kind of nuts. Like, sure, you have to have a bunch of creatures that have power 4 or greater in order to make a big creature, but no matter what, every single time you attack, you get to make another creature. You get to turn one of your lands into a creature. And remember, even if it's just a small creature, that doesn't mean that it's useless or not beneficial in combat because you don't want it to die. Because if it does die, an Earthbent land just comes back as the normal land. So you're not really worried about putting it at risk, holding it back as a chump blocker even potentially, which could be really kind of nuts, just generating a chump blocker every single turn. When it dies, it comes back as the normal land, and then on your turn you attack again, turn it into a creature again, rinse and repeat. All of that seems kind of awesome. I don't think he's quite there for Constructed, although he could be. He could be. Being able to generate Earthbent land creatures every single turn, there's an outside chance. I'm guessing probably not, because 4 mana is just a lot in the current standard, because power creep's a hell of a drug, and 3 years, and 27 sets, and yada yada yada. But I still think he's really cool, and I can't wait to play him in Limited for sure. Next up, we've got Boomerang Basics, another sorcery lesson for just 1 blue mana. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If you control that permanent, draw a card. This card's super good. The only real downside to this is the fact that it's not instant speed, it's sorcery speed, but it's only 1 mana, and it can pivot, right? You can use it as temporary removal, sort of like tempo removal against your opponent's stuff, and it can hit any permanent, not just a creature, or you could just return one of your own things and draw a card, which is super good. This might even be as good as Nurturing Pixie in the Pixie style decks. What's better, having a 2/2 flyer or drawing a card as the extra bonus value for your 1 mana put a thing back in your hand that you want to replay? I think in some situations you could argue drawing the card, to be completely honest. So I think this card's actually really, really good. The fact that it's a lesson and works with all of your lesson synergies as well makes it even better. And like I said in previous videos, it's possible that in Strixhaven we get more learn spells, new learn spells, and now we're allowed to search for these lesson spells in our sideboard in Standard. Granted, the power of these lessons is a little bit up there, so I'm starting to think that maybe that won't be the case, but there still is a chance we get learn spells in Strixhaven, and that would be absolutely nuts. Either way, I actually think this card is really, really good. But next up, we've got Destined Confrontation, a sorcery for 2 white and 2. Each player chooses any number of creatures they control with total power 4 or less, then sacrifices all other creatures they control. Interesting, so it kills everything that's 5 or more. Everything with 5 or more. And it's sacrificed, so it gets around indestructible, gets around hexproof, and only leaves things that are 4 power or less. Any number of creatures they control with total power. Oh, with total power 4 or less. So it doesn't leave everything that has power 4 or less. You can only pick a total combined power of 4 power worth of things to save. And then you have to sacrifice everything else. This card's awesome. We just got an uncommon sweeper in white. Sure, it's got like a hoop you gotta jump through, but both players get to keep the same amount of power. So you're evening the playing field. You're definitely taking out all of their extra value if they're ahead on the board. And depending on how you line this up, you could get even further ahead by making sure that you have the right creatures to give you the most value being left behind for this. Like, I don't know, like a 120 or something, which I think is a card that they actually just spoiled today, which is coming maybe in the next video. I don't know. But anyway, I think there's some interesting ways you can utilize this. I think there's a chance this might even show up in Standard, even being an uncommon. This is a really interesting card. I'm excited to brew around it because I think there are some ways you can line things up to get more value out of this than your opponent. But either way, in Limited, this thing's gonna be everywhere. Just a constant, like, balance power reset if things get out of hand on the board that you can utilize in Limited to just take out all of the problematic threats on your opponent's side. Even things up. Just seems kind of nuts. I love everything about this card. I really can't envision more right now about exactly how to use it. I'm just going to have to experiment and play with it a bunch. I can't wait to use it in Limited. I think this card is actually really, really cool. Next up, we've got Fatal Fissure, an instant for 1 black and 1. Choose target creature. When that creature dies this turn, you Earthbend 4. Honestly, kind of an interesting card. It's almost like a scam card, except you don't get the creature back. Instead, you replace the thing that died with essentially a 4/4. You turn your land into a 4/4. And you gotta remember, with Earthbending, when that creature dies, it's gonna come back as the normal land, which is kind of interesting. You could actually cast this spell on a land that you've already Earthbent as it's about to die, and the land will just come back. And then I think the way things line up, you can actually just turn that same land into a 4/4 after that, which is kind of interesting. Either way, just using this as a nice combat trick to protect your board state, and, you know, if they try to use instant speed removal, just respond with the Fatal Fissure and get some value out of it. Or maybe chump block their dude with one of your guys that you don't mind dying. Maybe you even get extra value off your guy dying, triggering a death trigger, and then you replace it with an Earthbend 4/4 as well, which could be kind of crazy. So I think this card is interesting. We're not going to know just how good it is until we get to try it out for ourselves, but it's definitely worth considering. Next up, we've got Combustion Man, a legendary creature human assassin for 5 mana, 2 red and 3. It's a 4/6, and whenever Combustion Man attacks, you destroy target permanent unless its controller has Combustion Man deal damage to them equal to his power. What an interesting card. 4/6 for 5. 5 mana is kind of a lot, but potentially killing any permanent you want unless you hit them for 8 might be worth it. You know, it's almost like it's an 8/6 in a way. It's an 8/6 that maybe deals half damage and kills their best permanent instead, which seems kind of okay. It definitely seems pretty good for Limited. Even though 5 mana is kind of a lot, this feels like a really big endgame threat that can just take over a board all by itself under the right situation. It's also worth pointing out that if you manage to buff this guy's power, it gets even crazier. If you can swing in like with a +3 power for 7, and then they have to take 14 unless they let you destroy target permanent they control. That seems kind of bananas. Actually, you don't even deal the damage in order to trigger the ability. All you have to do is attack. So you actually get to destroy a permanent or make them take the damage right away before they even get to declare a blocker, which makes it even better. Not to mention it's got two very relevant creature types, human and assassin. I'm really tempted to try to build this in standard, to be completely honest. I sort of love my assassin deck, and even though 5 mana seems like a lot for an assassin deck, I think it's at least worth trying. This guy could be really interesting. Probably not. He's probably just too expensive. That's my biggest problem with standard being so big right now. 3 years worth of sets, an insane amount of sets each year, is the power level is just way up here. You have something like this, which maybe if we had a normal standard 2 years and 4 sets in each year, like maybe the power level would be just enough that it's worth considering, and it might actually make the cut, because standard is essentially just mini Pioneer right now. This just gets totally cut off at the knees, and it's just not powerful enough for the 5 mana, and that's really unfortunate. So I really hope Wizards goes back to like 2-year rotation and slows down on the sets coming out, because it's just way too much, man. I really want cards like this to be able to shine in standard again. Cards like this need a format to shine in outside of limited, and that's what standard used to kind of be. It used to kind of be that format where a card like this was on the cusp of being playable, and it's just not the case anymore, and that's kind of depressing. But either way, we're going to experiment with it in limited for sure. Next up, we've got Earth Kingdom Protectors, a creature human soldier ally for 1 white mana. It's a 1/1 vigilance for 1. You can sacrifice this creature, another target ally you control gains indestructible until end of turn. This card's awesome. I already have a human tribal deck that has a ton of cards in it that are dedicated to protecting your board state and making it almost impossible for them to kill the creatures that they actually want to kill. And this card just adds to that in all the best ways, and it can come down on 1, start to get some negligible damage right away while protecting your board, while being held back as a blocker. All of that seems really good, and it has 3 relevant creature types to boot. Even my dog seems to be kind of upset about it. Bo, quiet down. Stop prowling. My dog loves to prowl. Next up, we've got Wolfbat, a 2/2 flying for 1 black and 2. And whenever you draw your second card each turn, you can pay a black, and if you do, return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. The finality counter is probably going to keep this from seeing any amount of reasonable play in Constructed, in Standard in particular, but I think this is actually going to be really, really good in Limited. A 2/2 flyer for 3 is somewhat on par, and even if it does only come back once, it coming back once I think is kind of a huge deal in Limited, so I think this card's actually really, really good. But next up, we've got Combustion Technique, an instant lesson for 1 red and 1, and it deals damage equal to 2 plus the number of lesson cards in your graveyard to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. You get the exile clause, you get all of the lesson synergies tacked on, you get at least 2 damage no matter what, even if you don't have lessons in your graveyard. All of this makes this card way better than it might seem at first glance. And then the fact that it just scales in the lesson deck is even better. In fact, even if you're not in the lesson deck, you're still going to maybe incidentally have 1 or 2 lessons in your graveyard in the mid game and be able to get even more value out of this. So I think this is actually a super good card. You're probably going to want to grab it because it's not going to table. Next up, we've got Kyoshi Island Plaza. This is the green uncommon shrine, a legendary enchantment shrine for 1 green and 3. When it enters, you search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of shrines you control. Put those cards onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. And whenever another shrine you control enters, search for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle. This one isn't all that special. I mean, you could maybe theoretically play the 5-color shrine deck and use this as your fixing so that you can play all of the rest of the shrines, at least in Limited. In Constructed, it feels a little bit slow, even though it does grab a bunch of lands and it can continue to trigger and grab even more lands. It just feels really, really slow to me at 4 mana. Like, you have to waste your entire turn 4 with 0 board presence in order to set this up, and that just seems too slow. But in Limited, this could end up being the backbone of making the Shrine deck work as an archetype, and I kind of want that archetype to work in Limited, so hopefully that's the case. Hopefully this is worth playing, and hopefully that deck ends up being relevant. But next up, we've got Professor Z, Anthropologist. He's a 0/3 legendary human advisor ally for 2 mana in the colors of Visit. It's hybrid mana, so you don't have to be in both blue and red, just one or the other. You can tap him to discard a card and draw a card, so basically rummaging. You can also pay 1 mana, tap him, and sacrifice him to return target instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand, activate only during your turn. Honestly, kind of interesting. It comes down as a relatively decent blocker, has a little bit of silver lining value in that it lets you rummage at instant speed at the end of your opponent's turn after you're done holding it up as a blocker, or maybe in response to blocking if this thing's going to die in combat. But then you also potentially have the ability when you're ready later on in the game and it's not valuable to you as a blocker anymore, just chuck it, get your best instant or sorcery back, and get a little bit of value. Seems pretty good. 2 mana's kind of a lot, but you know, for what you're getting, especially if you're in Is It, having a creature that's not contributing to attack, that's not putting pressure on the opponent, it might be a big ask at 2 mana, but I guess it depends on what the Limited format ends up being like. The more aggressive your opponents are, the more likely you might need something like this to stall out the game a little bit until you can start to get some of your key cards working for you. So maybe, we'll have to wait and see. But next up, we have our first rare of the day. This is Earthbender Ascension, an enchantment for 1 green and 2. When it enters, you get to Earthbend 2 and search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Before we go any further, that alone is really good value. Getting a 2/2 creature for 3 mana and also fetching a land, that's sort of, I feel like that's kind of above rate. Like, it's slightly below rate for just the creature. It's slightly below rate for just the land, but getting the creature and the land together is really, really good for your 3 mana. Plus, it's an enchantment, so it's another permanent on the battlefield. It's another piece of real estate. Potentially, you could sacrifice it to things. You could pick it up with a pixie and recast it, stuff like that. So there's actually a lot of value packed into this card right off the bat. But then it has a landfall trigger. Whenever a land you control enters, put a quest counter on it. And also, when this triggers, if you have 4 or more quest counters on it, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, and it gains trample until end of turn. Since you have more than enough value in the first part of the card, this landfall ability is just pure gravy, eventually getting to the point where you're able to build up the power and toughness of the creatures you already have in play, and get a little bit of incidental trample on a card that's already kind of giving you all the value that you want out of it when you first play it. Seems really good to me. There's no question why it's a rare, it just has so much card advantage packed in. But I feel like it's packed in a way that's very easy to overlook. This doesn't do anything super huge or super splashy, but it's just incredibly efficient for everything that you get out of it. You get immediate value in 2 different ways, plus the enchantment, which can potentially be sacked or reused, plus an eventual landfall trigger that grows your board and spits out incidental trample. Like, all of that on one card is just a lot, and I think I love it. I don't know what deck this goes in, but it definitely belongs somewhere. Next up, we've got Agna Quella. This is the blue land in the cycle of monocolored lands that we're seeing in this set. This one enters tapped unless you control a basic land, taps for a blue mana. You can also pay 1 blue and 2, tap this, draw a card, and then discard a card. So it's just a little bit of incidental value, access to looting through your land, which doesn't seem super good at first glance, but the fact that this is sort of just tacked onto a land for free is what makes it so good. All of these lands are really, really, really easy to run in monocolor decks, maybe even 2-color decks, but definitely monocolor decks, alongside a whole bunch of basics, and you have almost 0 opportunity cost to play a playset of these, and just have them come down alongside your islands, and just have this incidental value that you can access later on in the game, which feels almost completely free. And that's what makes it so good. Even though the ability is not super amazing, and you do have to dump a hefty amount of mana into it, not only the 3, but tapping this land itself, the fact that it's almost free and it's just incidental and it's just there if you have nothing better to do is what's going to make this so good, especially in monocolor decks. But like I said, it even has a chance of seeing a decent amount of play and still consistently coming down untapped in dual color decks, depending on what the deck looks like. So, really interested to see how much of a splash these lands in particular end up making in Standard. I think they're pretty cool. Next up, we've got Raven Eagle, a 2/3 flying bird assassin for 1 black and 2. Whenever this creature enters or attacks, you exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. If a creature card is exiled this way, you create a clue token, and whenever you draw your second card each turn, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. Man, power creep is a hell of a drug. This card just does everything. Just literally does everything. It's an evasive flyer that can double as an evasive blocker, that can get rid of problems in your opponent's graveyard, that can pivot and get rid of your own creatures so that you can generate clues for card advantage. You can then sack those clues to not only get card advantage, but trigger drains on your opponent because you're drawing a second card. You can also trigger drains on your opponent by drawing a second card through other means and playing other card draw spells, and all of that is just in one package on one card that costs 3 mana. There's just so much going on here, it's nuts. And it's crazy to me that this is where Standard is at, right? We're getting cards where, in order to make them playable, and make players give them the time of day and even consider running them in Standard, they have to kind of just do everything. They have to do so much and have so much value, and it's crazy. Wizards, slow down. You're drunk. I need coffee. Card is sweet. Next up, we've got Waterbender Ascension, an enchantment for 1 blue and 1. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you put a quest counter on it, and then if it has 4 or more quest counters on it, you get to draw a card. And then it also has this Waterbend 4 ability, target creature can't be blocked this turn. This one's really interesting because most of these Ascension enchantment cards we've seen so far give us immediate value and then something we can build towards, where I feel like this card has 2 different things that we can build towards. Get it down early, and by the time you've hit the player for a few different combat phases, you eventually get it to 4, and then you're drawing cards every single time you deal damage, which is nice. But you also have this other ability that you have to dump mana into or tap a bunch of creatures, so you can't really use it super early on curve. It's something that you kind of want to just vomit out your board state, put a bunch of creatures onto the battlefield, and then eventually, when you don't have much left to play, use this as your mana sink to make your best creature unblockable so that it can get in, so that it can trigger the card draw off this, and, you know, keep doing your thing. It is nice that you can tap creatures in addition to paying mana in order to pay for that waterbending cost. That makes it a lot more usable, but it's still not going to work on curve, and it's still not going to get you any immediate value the turn that you play it, unless you play it on like turn 5 or 6. So it is a little different than the other ones. It has a lot more long-term value, but just doesn't impact the board at all immediately when you play it, at least not on curve. So how good is it? Card advantage is card advantage, so I'm tempted to say it's nuts. And unblockable is great. This card's going to be nuts and limited for sure, but it's a rare, so obviously it's going to be nuts and limited. Does it even see play in Standard? I have no idea. I have no idea. Let me know what you guys think down below. I think this card could go either way. But that's going to do it for today's spoilers. Thank you guys so much for checking out the video. I have another video coming with even more spoilers because they just never stop, so look forward to that. I've got some deck techs on the way as well, and don't forget about early access. It's happening next week on Wednesday, November 12th and 13th. I'm going to be doing a marathon stream both days. We're going to be building a ton of different decks, and if you guys have ideas about decks you want to see using these cards, let me know in the comments. I'll build them, I'll run them, we'll have a grand old time. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you're new, help me out. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck techs, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.